A very good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining the ISAS book seminar titled Changing Destiny, a Memoir of Sat Pat Khattar. Mr. Khattar's autobiography book shares his life journey from arriving in Singapore at a young age to his unexpected educational and career achievements, all while cherishing the importance of family and friends. We are delighted to have with us today the author of the book, Mr. Sat Pat Khattar himself, founder and chairman, Khattar Holdings Private Limited, and author, Changing Destiny, and Professor Tan Tai Yong, chairman, Institute of South Asian Studies, NUS, and president, Singapore University of Social Sciences. Please note that this session is being live streamed on the ISAS Facebook page. I would now like to invite ISAS Director, Associate Professor Iqbal Singh Sevia to deliver the welcome remarks and commence the book seminar. Dr. Iqbal, please.
A very good afternoon, Professor Tan Tai Yong, Chairman, Institute of South Asian Studies, Singapore, Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore. Mr. Sat Pat Khattar, author of Changing Destiny and the reason we are all here today. Professor Tommy Koh, Ambassador at Large. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore, I thank you for joining us for this afternoon's book seminar on Mr. Sat Pat Khattar's memoir, Changing Destiny. ISAS is honored to host this book seminar for Mr. Khattar, who was one of the early members of ISAS's management board. Mr. Khattar served on the ISAS management board for 8 years, from 2005 to 2013, and has remained a pillar of support for the Institute, and we're grateful for that. We're gathered here to celebrate the remarkable life journey of Mr. Khattar. At the age of 5, Mr. Khattar experienced the harrowing partition of India, an event that uprooted his family and millions of others. His family had to leave their home in Beira, Pakistan, and struggle to make their way to Delhi. The family would subsequently find its way to Singapore. From these humble beginnings, Mr. Khattar emerged as an extraordinary individual who overcame various challenges. Starting his professional journey as a sports goods salesperson, Mr. Khattar seized opportunities that crossed his path, transforming himself into an eminent lawyer. His strength of character is reflected in the fact that having lost both his parents at a young age, Mr. Khattar shouldered the responsibility of leading his family while pursuing his studies at the university. I would add here that Mr. Khattar's memoir presents insights into the socio-economic history of Singapore itself, from the experience of those who arrived to Singapore via steamships like the Sangola, to the development of institutions and networks that played an important role in the communities that had settled in Singapore, to the development of the public sector and public service sector in post-independent Singapore. As the title of the memoir suggests, philosophically, Mr. Khattar contemplates the idea of changing destiny. In the epilogue, he reflects upon his life and asks if it is luck and destiny that conspired to shape the trajectory of his life. It is not my intention here to engage in this philosophical debate. These are left for other settings. And I notice in the book, and I'm not sure if I should say this, there's reference to a blue label and black label whiskey as well. Those may be the spiritual environments for such philosophical debates. But I would just add this much, that it is clear from the book that Mr. Khattar's life has been shaped by resilience, determination, and the choices he made as circumstances around him changed. As he writes, we have always lived in uncertain times, and we need to believe in change. On behalf of ISAS, I congratulate Mr. Khattar on his memoir. Changing Destiny will no doubt be an inspirational read to many of us. Like all of us here, I look forward to listening to the interesting sharing of Mr. Khattar's life journey, and I'm delighted to hand the floor to Mr. Khattar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Iqbal. I'd like to now invite Mr. Khattar to deliver the introduction to his book. Mr. Khattar, please.
Friends, thank you all for coming to this function. Tomorrow is a holiday, not in celebration of anything that we're doing today, but still, I'm so glad to see so many friends. All of you are personally close to me. Most of you, there are few people I'm meeting for the first time. I did not intend to have a launch for the book. It was my desire that the book would be for family and friends. And friend means all of you. My mentor and mentor to another 1 million Singaporeans, Tommy Koh, thought that I should make this book more readily available. That's an ongoing thing, and I will take into account. Tommy is my schoolmate, of course, many years my senior. Then he became my teacher. Then he became my lecturer. And he was responsible for the fact that I could do law because I was still selling sports goods for my father. And I couldn't afford to come during the daytime to the university. So Tommy, thank you for making a small part of this possible. The cover of the book is a painting by my wife. She's an artist, and I toyed around with various alternatives, but finally decided that if you look at the cover, it's Fullerton Building, where I was a tax officer. It is the new building. I've been there for over 30 years. And 10 Collier Quay was right inside there. Some small part was my father's business. And I tried to learn the business and sell sports goods. So notwithstanding that we didn't have a launch, we decided that at least and this is really to the persuasion of my good friend, Professor Tan Tai Yong. He knows more about Punjab than I do as a Punjabi. But he again is a friend of many years, and there's some things you can't refuse, friends. So I hope you all don't mind that what we'll do today. Why did I write the book? I decided that my family, especially the next generation, were not aware of where I came from, how I came to be in Singapore, what happened in Singapore. And it has been a roller coaster, but changing kind of destiny, from selling sports goods to law. The university thought I was doing full-time. Actually, I was doing part-time. There were small tragedies also. My father passed away about 5 weeks before the second year exam. And I asked my classmates to ask Tommy, I don't want to sit for the exam because I was afraid that if I sat for the exam, I would do so badly that I would be asked to leave the university. Word got back to me that the faculty was kind enough to say, you have to sit for this exam. However badly you do, we'll allow you to repeat. For reasons that I still don't understand fully, that year I got a book prize. You know, fate is like that. But that was the last book prize I got. because after my father passed away, I had more freedom to run the business. I bought myself a new car, got other distractions, and then finished law. I didn't apply to join the legal service. The legal service wrote to me and said, look, you haven't applied, but we've got your results. We'd like you to think about joining the legal service. Here are a set of forms. Ego got the better of me. I filled the form. And a week later, I was appointed Deputy Public Prosecutor and State Counsel. Long name. Everybody was, in the department, AG's chambers had that title. About 4 months later, one of my classmates who had been posted to the tax department decided to go back to Malaysia. So there was a vacancy. Nobody wanted to go there. I volunteered. And that has been the stepping stone. And I'm grateful to the many people who have helped me to be where I am today. Some of you have also played a part. Professor Khattar and I helped to set up the Democratic Socialist Club. That itself is a journey. There have been many journeys. Then a number of you might ask, if you were doing so well in the tax department, this sounds a little bit of a boast, but I was the youngest super scale officer in the whole government at one time. But after 7 years there, I decided that I did not want to die as a tax officer. So I decided to start a law practice. And my ambition was to run a small practice. And from that practice, take 2 months holiday a year, every year, and don't aspire to compete with the larger firms. That ambition lasted about 6 months, and the firm started to grow. I borrowed from the faculty, Dr. David Wong, who was my classmate, a few years older than me. He was already a graduate by the time he joined the law faculty. And the two of us helped to build the law firm. We had Rajendran to join us. Then there were others like Rashid, whose son is here, Farhan is here. All these people have played a very important part in my life. And I'm grateful to all of them for making this journey possible. Now the family cannot say they didn't know where I came from. And this offers me some satisfaction, because this is what I wanted very much to do. What the future holds doesn't matter, really. We can't change, we can't predict. But I have finished this. I take into account, Tommy, what you said, that I got to make this book, or at least the content, available to a broader audience. And we'll look at that. But it is clear that I'm not going to write another book. I don't think I'm made to be an author. And this will be, but I'm more than happy. And that's why I insisted that this book not be sold. That's why there was no launch as such, because it is intended for family and friends, and it is not available And it's not meant to be a charging provision kind of event. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe the next lot is, the next part of the program is that Taeyong will say a few words, and then I'll be more than happy to answer questions from anybody who has read the book and has got queries or even criticism, because the best thing that somebody like me would know is to have feedback, which I will carry into the rest part of my life. Taeyong, I hope that's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Khattar. I would now like to invite Professor Tan Taeyong to share his remarks. Professor, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this event. I'm so pleased that actually we're having this book seminar, book talk today, because it took some persuading with Sat Pat to get him to agree to do this. As you all heard earlier, when he decided to write his memoir, he said he'd do it for his family and friends. And he didn't want to he didn't want to put the book up for sale, so you can't find it in the bookshop. And I know that Professor Tommy Cole, his old friend and mentor, has persuaded him to make the book more readily available to a reading public, because there's a lot of interest in what he has achieved in his life, but he's always said that he did not want to publicize his life story. So I then persuaded him to at least agree to do a book talk, a book seminar, so that people beyond his immediate circle would be able to benefit from the stories and insights from a very fascinating autobiography. So I'm very pleased that he eventually acquiesced to that, and we are able to gather here today for him to share his memoir. Just let me say a few words about the book, my impressions on reading the book, and then we'll have a Q&A with the author himself. Well, Sat Pat Khattar is a known name in Singapore, and he's not only well known in the legal and business fraternity, but he has played major roles in various national agencies like NTUC, Law Society, PSC, Singapore Business Federation, among many others. He's a community leader. He led the Hindu Endowment Board, SINDA, and others, and has contributed generously to higher education. In many ways, as a historian, I found his life story fascinating because it mirrored the history of modern Singapore, as Iqbal mentioned earlier. He migrated to Singapore from India when both places were part of the British Empire. He came as a migrant, not unlike many who traveled to Singapore from different parts of Asia, seeking refuge from economic hardships and hoping for a bright new future in a new home. His family, his father in particular, had to build a business, working not only in Singapore, but around the region. He was able to do well through hard work, enterprise, and education, and his professional success was buttressed by a loving and stable family. He dedicated his memoir to his wife, Rita, and it is important to acknowledge the critical part that she has played in his life's achievements. So maybe we should acknowledge the role of Mrs. Khattar. His ability to thrive and succeed in Singapore speaks to the values on which independent Singapore was built: meritocracy and multiculturalism. He succeeded by dint of effort and talent, and the fact that he was a minority who was not born to privilege did not stand in his way. I'll just mention three things which I picked up from the book, which were consistent themes in his story. The first is about relationship. It was his relationship with his friend and mentor, the late former President S.R. Nathan, that prompted him to write this book. And this book is about the relationships that has shaped his life journey that he spoke about earlier, from his days as an early migrant to building up his business, his father's business, and to his professional life in Singapore. And what's really remarkable about this book is that the memoir is filled with pages of his devotion to his family and his love for his wife, the children, their spouses, and their lovely grandchildren. And if you look to the end, the last few pages of the book, you read his poems, and which is dedicated to his family. So this speaks about the importance of relationship to the man. We also given insights into the professional relationships which he has built over the years, over decades, with his friends and business partners, and many of these relationships persist to this day. The second theme which I picked up was his sense of duty. This was evident from the obligations to his father's business, his devotion to his family, and his duty to community and country. He became head of family at the young age of 21 when his father passed away, and took over responsibilities to look after his grandmother, his stepmother, and his young siblings. And on top of business and family challenges, he tried to finish his law studies because he did not want to disappoint those who had given him the opportunity. And this is where he met Professor Cole, Prof. Sheridan, and others who had faith in him, and he decided that he must validate that faith. And even after he established a very successful law practice, he gave his time and energy generously to many causes and answered the calls to public service. The thing that intrigued me about Sat Pal, before I read this book, was why did he not get into politics? And now the answer was given in this book. He came close. But in the end, I think he had contributed in so many other ways that his non-participation in politics didn't matter because he made his impact in other ways. The third point I would like to make is his generosity of spirit. And apart from his business ventures, Sat Pal actively engaged in philanthropy and social initiatives. He demonstrated a strong commitment to giving back to society, to making a positive impact on the lives of others. Through his philanthropic efforts, he supported various charitable causes, including education and community development. Sat Pal's philanthropy reflected his compassion and desire to contribute to the overall welfare of society. Now, let me conclude. Sat Pal is an accomplished individual with a notable life and career. He had considered how destiny and change, the many unplanned and unforeseen events that affected his life in so many ways, influenced and shaped his life trajectory. He concluded that his life story was perhaps the outcome of a combination of destiny or luck and agency, hard work and action. It is evident that he was presented with many opportunities, but he knew how to open the doors when the doors were slightly open ajar for him. And this was what made the difference. It is clear from his memoirs that while fate and destiny might have played a part, Sat Pat Khattar's personal values, his character, hard work, entrepreneurial acumen, and integrity were instrumental in the successes that he has achieved in his personal and professional as well as public life. So I recommend this book to all of you who have not read it. I know it's not available to the public, but I don't think I'm sort of making an announcement contrary to his wishes if I say that if you are here today and you wish to get a copy of the book, please approach him and he'll try to make it available to you. So on that note, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to sit next to him and ask him to answer your questions. So please, if you have anything you want to know about this book, please direct your question to Mr. Khattar. So thank you all very much, and I will now have the Q&A. Okay, so without further ado, can I invite the first question? So maybe by a show of hands, how many of you have, oh, okay, wait, the lady over there and then Taya next. Okay, so yes, please. Maybe a brief introduction so that all of us know who you are and then the question.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vidya. I have read the book in entirety. I enjoyed many aspects of the book, but my question today is about the business stories that he shared with us. I particularly like the story on the forming of NTUC Income and his role in the NTUC, and you know, all of that story I think helps us to understand the purpose of the NTUC and what it played, what role it played in society, and his personal stake in that. So if you can share with us some some facts about that, and also some of your own personal feelings about it. You shared a lot of facts, but the feelings behind being part of a movement like that, when you reflect back, if you can tell us a little bit about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Divya. I was working in the tax department. I think this is stated in the book also, that I got a note to say, please go and see the finance minister who was on the 5th floor. This is the first time I was invited to see him. So I went to see him, and he said that, look, the trade unions need financial muscle to make sense. Something which is by world standards an enlightened view, that you can, if you are a good trade unionist, but you don't have the money, you don't have the means to put into practice what you want to put into practice, you're not going to get very far. The Singapore government, in their enlightened view, took the position that we will help to build a financial muscle for the trade unions. And one of the ways in which Dr. Goh decided that this financial muscle would be built would be to allow the trade unions to go into various forms of business. And one of the biggest form of going into business and accumulate wealth was a life insurance company. A life insurance company has a lot of reserves, and its success is dependent very much on how much they are able to accumulate. You sell a life insurance policy, 30 years, he pays you a premium. And then 30 years later, you give him back what he has paid with a bonus. So he said, I'm going to give to the trade unions a license to go into life insurance and general insurance, and they need help because they're not very knowledgeable. So you are going to help them. I said, sir, I know very little about life insurance. He said, that's not true. You did insurance in your final year. He'd read about it. I ran out of excuses. I said, yes. So I went to see, and for the first time in my life, I met Devan Nair. And he had in his hand a life table. So he looked at me, he says, you've come to help us. Do you know what a life table is? I said, I don't know what a life table is. The life table predicts how many people are going to die when, and on the basis of which life insurance premiums are set. So I learned what a life table is. And we had very good people to be on the first board. We also pinched from Asia Insurance a chief executive, and he helped us, Mr. A.T. Shimpi, to start off. Mr. Goh Chok Tong was on the board. Various other very senior people were on the board. Over time, of course, they left. And for my sins, I couldn't leave. I stayed there for over 40 years. And to me, that has been one of the most important parts of my life, because I learned, I mean, being a sports goods salesman is a tiny business. Being a tax officer is legal work. Here I learned the business of how to deal with building up a company in a quaint field like insurance, where over time, it's not only the insurance you sell, it's also the investment from which you pay them a bonus. And it was not easy, because here we had a chief executive who was from the commercial side. He wanted us to do hull underwriting. Now, what has hull underwriting got to do with trade unions, it must have some synergy. He was very unhappy because I objected to going into hull underwriting. After about 2 months or 3 months, I said, we're not going to do it. He didn't like it. He said, you cannot decide for me. We take it to the board. Luckily for me, the board agreed with me. We didn't do. Hull insurance is the type of business where you can show a profit for the first 3 years, and then you have losses for the next 20 years. And you're not in charge of deciding whether or not those claims are valid or not, because these claims are handled in Paris or in England. So I'm very glad that I learned a lot, and I was a party to what became important. That after that we never tried to do or go into fields which had nothing to do with insurance. Of course, we were helped by the government because they had a vested interest in seeing that we succeeded. And national servicemen were put into a hall like this with the doors locked. And our general manager would go and give them a speech or a spiel on the importance of life insurance, very little of which they understood. And then they were told that you can leave the hall only after signing. And so they all signed up, became life insurance clients of ours. Of course, at that stage of their life, they could only afford $10 a month or $5 a month or $20 a month. Luckily, we had the check-off system, which helped us to manage that. Of course, from there, as a base, we grew and grew and grew. And by the time I left them, we had $50 billion worth of life insurance funds, not our money. Dr. Go said, look, I'm going to give the license, but I still want you to raise $1 million as capital from the trade union circle. Now, raising $1 million those days was not easy. The unions that had the money were saying, "What are you mad? We're going to give you all our money." But with Dev and I's persuasion, we were able to raise the 1 million. And we started off and never looked back. Of course, they've gone through ups and downs. It's never plain sailing. But as I said, I learned, as far as I'm concerned, I learned a lot in that 40 years whilst this thing. And in between the same period, I was a member of the Securities Council for 17 years. I was on the PSC for 9 years. I was a member of the Presidential Council of Minority Rights, which is a very important role. Not that, it looks after to secure that no legislation or regulations made under the legislation discriminates against any community on the grounds of racial discrimination. All these have helped me to be what I am. And if I just stuck to law, my life would be different. But to me, these things have been very hard to say more important, because you can't measure importance. But they have been very satisfying for me to be involved, because they are like business, the business which I started with. Of course, it was a tiny business. So it is the trade unions, and then, of course, when the trade unions were successful, everybody wanted to join the bandwagon. And the government was concerned to see that the trade unions do not go into areas which have nothing to do with trade, some synergy. And we had mishaps also in some of these trade union activities. But so they set up a high-powered committee to decide what areas they could go into or not go into. And I ended up that. That later became the Singapore Labour Foundation. I had a big role to play in that, and I helped to write the constitution. What I did was even reviewed by Mrs. Lee Kuan Yew, who helped. These incidents in my life are very important to me, much more than my law practice or the success or the little success or sometimes not at all a success in the private sector. I, of course, finally, I had grown too old to continue, and after 40 years, I left the trade unions. But my heart, part of it is still there. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tayan? Tayan, the mic's coming to you. Yeah.
Tayan here, Tayan. I'm with the Center for Liberal Arts and Social Sciences at NTU, which I'm surprised, Taeyong, you hadn't heard of it. Anyway, I'm one of the one of those who are privileged to have received a copy kindly from Sat Pat and have read through it. And I would like to just make two comments. My field being literature, and we had met many years ago when we were fellow students and founded the Democratic Socialist Club. But he was in law and I'm in English literature, and we haven't met for many years, except occasionally. But I noticed he's got a poetic soul because his memoirs contain quite a few poems. And this is reflected, some of you may have noticed, in the very philosophical and poetic title. It's a pun on changing, which when I had a private discussion with him, he said he was unconscious of, but I think it was the unconscious poetic coming up, right? So changing in the verbal sense that you change destiny, changing destiny, which he seems to have done with hard work, intelligence, application, and also destiny changing, right? Regardless of what you do, and that's where fate comes in. But then, as they say, opportunity knocks on the door of somebody who is ready for opportunity, right? So I thought that was a really very good title. And I was most impressed, and including some of the very philosophical thoughts that are to be found in your poems coming towards the end of the book. The second comment I'd like to make is I'd like to join Tommy in urging you to publish the book. Well, it began as in private conversation with, I mentioned to you, it began as a personal memoir, as a gift for your family and to your friends. But I think it could also be a gift to Singapore and to the public. And from what you've just discussed yourself just now, there's so much there that is inspirational, your public service and your role, particularly in the co-op movement, which we all take for granted today. We go to the supermarket, we take the transport, the taxis and so on. But how did all that, this big success story, which we all take for granted, come about? And it was through individuals like yourself. And I think if you feel that, you know how you feel once you've written a book, you don't want to be writing again, right? But get somebody to ghostwrite, so to speak. You dictate to them and let them put and expand that part, the public part, because you might feel, with all those photos, and with your personal, so romantic love story, okay, this might be too personal for the public. But I think that there is much in your book that it seems to me could be inspirational, because nowadays the key figures seem to be politicians. I mean, in your time, we have a Tomiko, we have yourself, and other civil society figures who are not politicians and who are public intellectuals. It seems to me, who are your successors, right? So somebody like yourself, if you publish a book, and people might be inspired that there's a place for public service, public figures, independent of politics, right, to make their mark on society, right, and come forth and have the courage to contribute. Thank you, Sat Pat, and congratulations again on your book.
So those were, they were not questions, but 2 comments. Huh? And the last is an advocacy for you to think of doing another book, maybe an extension of this, minus some of the more personal photographs or something like that, but for you to consider, and then make the book more available to the public.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you. I'd like to think about that. I wouldn't like to make a commitment at this stage. Writing one book was challenging, and health permitting, I may or may not want to. I mean, the story of Singapore up to the time we got independence is so beautifully illustrated by the book by Mira Chen. I mean, I'm sure you all know about it. She's been a family friend to us for many, many years. She's written 9 books. Only one of them is about Singapore, but that it stops at Singapore's independence. I think she had started on the second part. We're still waiting for it. And I will never dream of writing something that anywhere near the professionalism that is embodied in Mira Chen's writings. On trade unions, I will only talk about this thing. When one of the cooperatives we set up was Comfort. Comfort shares were allotted to taxi drivers, and later we decided to go public. And when we decided to go public, the taxi drivers who each had a very small shareholding, they all sold out. We wish they hadn't, but we had to give them the opportunity. And over time, Comfort became a listed company, went into other areas of taxis, renewals, and everything else. So there's a time and place for most things, as far as I'm concerned. And whether I will do what you suggest, I'm not sure yet. I wouldn't like to make the commitment. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have next questions? Yes, please, sir. Right in front here.
Thanks very much. My name is Elan Cohen. I've lived in Singapore for 25 years. My wife and I have lived in Singapore for 25 years. And I had the privilege of getting to know Mr. Khattar. We met approximately 20 years ago. And I've had the privilege of not only knowing him and his family for most of the last 20 years, but also in the last 5 years serving with him as trustee for a charitable foundation. And my question is really about philanthropy. Sat Pal and Rita as well, but particularly Sat Pal I know better, is one of the most generous, caring, and compassionate people that I've met. And he does this not only publicly, but I've seen it on the foundation and personally towards many people anonymously. He gives so much of his time as well as treasure to others. My question is really to him, where does that feeling come from? How was it instilled in you to give back to the extent that you do, both publicly, privately, and how would you go about instilling this in other people? Speaking as a parent of young children, I'm wondering how do you instill this tremendous penchant for philanthropy to other people? Thank you.
Thank you, Elan. Ilan and Christina are very close family friends also. And thank you for what you said. I'm not sure that I started off knowing that I wanted to be in philanthropy simply because I did not have the means. We came from very humble beginnings. My father never had a car. He used to travel by buses. And it was always, but he never begrudged other people being well off. We lived in rent-controlled premises in Bideford Road, which is still around, where Takashimaya was, which was across the road, was old Teochew Cemetery. So philanthropy means you have the means to get engaged in philanthropy. And as a believing Hindu, I believe that there is something I did in my last life or something that stems from the fact that the elders in my life who have passed away have given me blessings, which allows me to be able to do a little. Not long ago, a few months ago, I was asked to attend a dinner, and I realized that it was a fundraising dinner on Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's 100th birthday, which is this year. And I told the person who invited me, I said, look, you've invited a lot of businessmen, and I don't want to embarrass myself by they giving millions, and I may not be able to do so. He said, no, you have to come because we want you there. And don't worry, we will not announce who gave what. Given the assurance, I attended the dinner. I made a small commitment by my standards. And it is probably the smallest contribution among the 20 people who were there. As Khalil Gibran said in his book, in his poem, The Prophet, neither the giver nor the receiver, neither the giver should be swollen-headed because he is a giver, nor should the recipient feel small because he is the recipient of somebody else's means. And because he said both of them are merely the avenues of a higher being, that in this life, one is a giver and the other is the receiver. I believe in that. I think the satisfaction one gets from being able to give, if one is able, is huge, because you cannot measure that. Even in my law firm, we had a doctrine that if there is a charity or an organization which is not for profit, you do not charge legal fees at all. We never advertised that because we couldn't afford to advise all companies that we would become the sole legal service provider. But we made it a point that if somebody like a charity came to us, we would do what was needed, but we would not charge. And surprisingly, it may sound not so deep, but the satisfaction that one gets from doing something like that is huge. Tommy could have done fabulous things in private practice or in politics. He chose to remain subdued in his own way, that he has that fantastic position that he enjoys with all of us. Thank you.
Tommy, on cue.
I have two questions, one on Singapore and one on India. The PAP tried to recruit Sat Pat as a candidate for Parliament. Sat Pat, could you tell us a story of how you failed the interview? And on India, many Singaporeans have tried to invest in India, and many of them have not succeeded. They found India a difficult business environment, a lot of bureaucracy, you need a lot of patience, a lot of legal obstacle. So could you share with us the secret of success of your investment in India?
Secret of success of investment in India.
The first one first.
Yeah, first. Thank you. After I was scolded by Lee Kuan Yew in NLT 4, where I happened to be there because I was studying for my master's. I was not married, didn't have a girlfriend, steady girlfriend. I used to hang around the university every evening. Suddenly I found that he was going to give a lecture. I heard that he was going to give a lecture, which he used to do almost every year in the first term. And on that occasion, he said, the topic will be decided by me after I come. But the hall was full, 800 people or something, NLT4. And the topic he chose was, there is a credibility gap between what is news and what the media chooses to report. And of course, he derided the media to say, not great. Question time. Most people didn't like asking questions to LK. Why? Stupid me put up his hand. And I said, in very polite terms, I said, sir, is it not likely that in a country like Singapore, where the average person at most reads one newspaper, because there's only one newspaper to read in the English stream, that this credibility gap that you talk about is likely to get wider rather than narrower, which I thought was a very fair question. He didn't like it. And his face turned red, which again happened on, I'll come back to the politics side of it. He says, what is your discipline? I said, law. And he actually said, yours is the type of puerile lawyer we could do without in Singapore. I didn't know what hit me. But I thought that maybe the next morning there'll be a letter on my desk to say I wish to resign from legal service. Nothing like that happened. And he asked Padma Selva-Dore as he was going, who is that monkey who asked me that question? And Padma told him, he's a serving government servant. I just didn't say anything after that. When I was invited to consider politics, I was still a civil servant. Emphasis on the word civil. Went to see him. And I thought they skipped 3 steps. I only went through 2 steps. But you had to write your history, where you came from, why do you think politics, etc., etc. And I wrote. And by the questions he asked, it was obvious that he had read every word of what I had written. And then he asked me at the end of it, do you have any questions? And I said, yes. I wasn't thinking very hard. I said, the way you let Lim Chi On down was not very nice. He has given you yeoman service for many years. And I knew from other sources that he had been let down for the wrong reason. The late Devan Nair had taken a small dislike to him, and there was some political thing. So he was let down. And Lee Kuan Yew told me, he says, you know, in this country, we don't sweep anything under the carpet. The interview ended soon thereafter. I knew, as I said in the book, that my career in politics ended before it began. Which was, and I say this in all sincerity, I slept very well that night. I did not begrudge the fact that I didn't go into politics. But I had already told her, I said, if I ever go into politics, we have 2 houses, we'll have to sell one of them. And she said, that's fine. She said, you do what is important. What would have been my career, you certainly wouldn't have had at this session. And I am still, even after that incident, I continued to serve in PSCs, continued to serve on the Presidential Council, continued to serve. They never bore a grudge against me for the fact that I've said what they must have considered a stupid thing. That's the Singapore that I'm proud of. You ask what is the success of the Indian enterprises. Albert Hong and I were invited for lunch with PM Lee. And he said, what is it that the 2 of you see in India that all of us can't see? For me, the answer was simple. I've been to China quite a few times, but I couldn't understand the nuances of doing business there. The laws in China are opaque. There was a very large case on which we were right all the way. But there is a small principle in the Chinese constitution which says that if there is a non-Chinese litigant from outside China, the court cannot pronounce judgment without a reference to the Ministry for Overseas Chinese. And everybody said we had a good case, but they never got the answer, so we never got a judgment. In the end, we settled. Whereas in India, they speak English. In fact, they speak more English than the regional languages, which have, of course, longer history, even before Christ. But I found that I could understand the nuances. And I took certain decisions which my sons later joined me. One is sitting here. That it is important to judge people don't forget the American doctrine of signing a 600-page document for any investments written by 6 lawyers. In the end, you go before a court in India, you may never get a hearing during your own lifetime. And I can answer that. Personally, I was involved in some of those things. Judge a person on the basis of you making a value judgment. And that's much more important than any amount of legal documentation, which are important but not critical. And we've had fairly good success in India on the basis of my beliefs, which I'm trying very hard to inculcate to my children. One is a LSE graduate, the other is a lawyer who took some time to agree to give up his law to join the family business. But I'm glad they're both in business. And that's been the story of my life. There are many friends here who know about my story of my life. Thank you, Tommy.
Maybe one final question, Mira. Yeah. Sorry, two. Okay, you got. So Mira and then the gentleman over there. We'll take them together. Then we'll. Yeah, please go ahead.
Sat Pat, I'd just like to congratulate you on this lovely book. I think it's a splendid tribute. You've written it and this beautiful cover by Rita. So it's a wonderful tribute, I think, to you, both of you, and your partnership. I want to ask you a rather provocative question. As one writer to another, I want to ask you about the writing process, because writing memoir is actually an extremely difficult thing. You're dealing the whole time with issues of what to put in and mostly what to leave out, depending on what kind of memoir you're writing. So I would just like to ask you, I've seen I was with you at manuscript stage, so I know some of your struggles, but I'd just like to ask you, were there a lot of things that you now in retrospect feel you would have liked to put in that you didn't? You've told us the wonderful story of your non-start in politics. Were there other things that you would have liked to put in, or that you felt were too negative? Are there any stories that you can tell us about that side of the writing process?
We'll take the other question, then you answer together. So what did you leave out? Were there aspects of the story that you left out that would have been very interesting that we should know about? The thought process of how you created that narrative, and also what did you not put in for whatever reasons? So while you're thinking of that answer, maybe I'll ask the gentleman to ask the question. Yes, please. No, you go ahead. We'll take the two together.
My name is Kush Chopra, and I've known Mr. Sat Pat Khattar ji all my life, because he's known me since birth. We were neighbors. So first, a joyful coincidence. The fact that the name Kush appears at least 3 times in the book. Kushalia Devi, your mother, Kushwant Singh, the writer of the book that you referred to, the train to Pakistan, and Kushal, your neighbor in Bideford Road. So I just wanted to make the observation that one Kush was missing. Second, the question about Jalan Setia, really. You refer to Jalan Setia in the book as the home you bought in Macpherson Homes, but did not refer to Jalan Setia, whereas all the other houses got specific mention, you know, Bideford Road, Kansai, Anderson, Tanglin Hill. So what is it about Jalan Setia that, you know, you left out? So I'll stop there. I have many more questions, but I'll just stop there in the interest of time. Cheers. Great book. I enjoyed reading it. Thank you very much.
So the omission of the, not enough details on the first house, Jalan Setia, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, well, in a way linked to Mira's question about what would you have wanted to add to the book, which you did have a chance to for whatever reason? Yeah.
Understand. Answering that one first. Yeah, answering question first. We were neighbors. I've known him, as he very kindly put it, all his life. And that was the first house I ever owned, because Bideford Road was rented premises. I've known your whole family for a long time. Kushwan Singh, Kushalya Devi were not related, but they are important parts of my life. Kushwan Singh is editor of the Indian Illustrated Weekly for many years. We invited him for, I think, one of the conferences in Singapore. And at that conference, he was a bit of a disappointment, but that was an exception to the rule. In India, he had a fabulous reputation. And I have read almost, not all, but almost all his books. Friendship goes a long way. And you are a family friend. Thank you. To say there is nothing that I've put into the book which I shouldn't have, or the other way around, that I've kept back some of it, yes, that's true. It is not possible to be as candid to the extent of 100%. Do I regret having kept some part of it out? No. I think it is important, but not critical. My life hasn't changed by having kept some part of it out. I fell into a monsoon drain and would have died there in Bideford Road, because all the water from Kenil used to come and be there, stuck there. And I stepped into thinking there was a patch there. Turned out to be there was nothing there, so I fell into this thing. It's in the book. I have always been grateful for the fact that I lived. And because a neighbor from a neighboring estate happened to be there, all people of my age were shouting, but they couldn't do a thing. They were about my height. And this neighbor guy was a little bit of a gangster. He happened to be there. He pulled me up by my hair from the monsoon drain. Otherwise, my history would have ended there, and you wouldn't see the book. So you'll forgive me for saying, yes, there are incidents that I could have written. You, as a family friend, probably know more than what's written in the book about a family, as I know about yours. But some things we are best left out. I hope you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sat Pat, for your answers. I know there must be many more questions, but I'll bring this session to a formal end. There's a tea reception outside, and please feel free to approach the author and his family if you want to find out more. But we ask you to consider really making this book more available, and to consider writing a volume 2 if you have the time and inclination. In the meantime, please join me in congratulating Sat Pat for his wonderful.